We do begin with the latest on a tragedy in Houston's River Oaks neighborhood. A couple and their children were found dead last night. It is just horrific. The kids were only 4 and 8 years old.
A husband and wife building a business together. 2 young children. The kind of family people admire from a distance. The kind of life people quietly wish they had. And then, one welfare check changed everything. Inside that home, police found 4 bodies: a mother, a father, an 8-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old son. Authorities would later say it was a murder-suicide. Investigators believe the husband, Matthew Mitchell, shot his wife, Thy Mitchell, and their 2 children before turning the gun on himself. No public warning. No known emergency calls to the house in the previous 6 months. No one saw it coming. And that is what made it even more terrifying. Because sometimes the darkest stories begin inside the homes that look the safest. This is the story of the Mitchell family. And the question everyone kept asking after: what was happening behind closed doors? And that's when things got darker. Before tragedy, there was success. Thy Mitchell and Matthew Mitchell were well known in Houston's restaurant scene. They were the owners of Traveler's Table, a globally inspired restaurant that became one of the city's most recognized dining spots. Later, they also opened Traveler's Cart. Their brand was built around travel, food, and shared experiences, adventure, culture, connection. They were known as a couple who built something together. People saw ambition, elegance, growth. Friends described Di as warm, driven, and deeply involved in hospitality. She had grown up around restaurants and built a strong presence in Houston's food community. Matthew had taken a very different path: journalism, pharmaceutical leadership, then culinary arts, before stepping fully into the restaurant world. From the outside, they looked like proof that hard work could build the dream. And maybe that's why the ending shocked people so much, because it didn't fit the picture. Just days before everything happened, life appeared ordinary. Normal routines. There were public events, family moments, work, plans. Nothing that screamed disaster. People who had seen them said she seemed normal. There were no obvious public signs of collapse. That detail matters, because when tragedy comes without visible warning, people replay everything, every conversation, every post, every smile, looking for the clue they missed. Even one of their recent social media posts drew attention afterward. A light-hearted video with Matthew joking about growing old together. After the tragedy, people called it haunting, not because it predicted anything, but because hindsight makes ordinary moments feel heavier. That's what people do after loss. They search backward, trying to find the moment everything changed. But sometimes there is no obvious moment. Sometimes the silence is the warning no one hears. It started with concern, a babysitter, a family member. People close to the family had not heard from them since Sunday night. That was unusual enough to trigger a welfare check. Police arrived at the River Oaks home on Kingston Street around 5:30 p.m. They entered the house, and inside, they found all 4 family members dead from gunshot wounds. A 39-year-old woman, a 52-year-old man, an 8-year-old girl, a 4-year-old boy. The scene immediately shifted from concern to horror. Investigators began piecing together what had happened, and the early evidence pointed in one direction. Authorities said the male shot the 3 victims, then shot himself. The medical examiner later ruled Thy Mitchell and the 2 children's deaths homicides, and Matthew Mitchell's death a suicide. A family gone inside a house people once associated with success. And suddenly, the question was no longer what happened. It was, how did no one know? News spread fast. Houston's restaurant community was stunned. Customers, friends, staff, neighbors, people who had eaten there, people who had worked there, people who simply knew the family by reputation. Everyone was trying to process the same impossible fact. How does a family like this end like this? Flowers appeared outside the home. Photos were taped to walls. People stood outside quietly, trying to understand something that made no sense. At school, the loss was personal too. Their daughter, Maya, attended River Oaks Elementary. Counselors were made available for students and staff. Even the restaurants remained open, with staff asking for privacy and unity while they worked through unimaginable grief. That detail says a lot, because when tragedy hits public people, the grief becomes public too. And sometimes people are forced to mourn while still serving dinner, still answering phones, still trying to function. That kind of grief doesn't arrive quietly. It crashes through everything. Police did not release a clear motive, and that absence created even more tension, because people can accept tragedy faster than they can accept mystery. People want reasons, something to explain the unexplainable. Financial problems, private conflict, mental health, hidden domestic violence, something, anything. But authorities said there have been no recent calls for service of the residents in the last 6 months. That doesn't prove nothing was wrong. It only proves that not every crisis becomes public before it becomes deadly. That is one of the hardest truths in stories like this. Sometimes people are suffering in silence. Sometimes the people closest to them never see the full picture. Sometimes the performance of normal life is so convincing, even family believes it. And sometimes the danger exists behind carefully protected doors. That's what makes these cases so haunting. Not just what happened, but how invisible it was before it happened. After tragedies like this, people start building stories. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable. They say, there must have been signs. Someone must have known. It couldn't have been completely hidden. But reality is often uglier than that. Sometimes there were signs, but they looked like stress, fatigue, silence, distance, irritability. Things people dismiss because life is busy. Sometimes there were no signs people recognized at all. That is why these cases hit so hard, because they challenge a comforting belief. That disaster always announces itself first. It doesn't. Sometimes it arrives in a beautiful house, with smiling photos, and people everyone respected. That is why the story spread far beyond Houston, because it forced people to ask a frightening question. If this could happen there, where else could it be happening? The story of Thy Mitchell is not just about tragedy. It is about perception, the difference between what the world sees and what is happening in private. From the outside, people saw success, a restaurant, a marriage, children, stability. But behind that image, something was breaking, and by the time the world noticed, it was already too late. Sometimes the most disturbing stories are not the ones filled with mystery. They are the ones that happen in plain sight, the ones where everyone says they seemed happy, because happiness can be performed, silence can be hidden, and perfection can be a mask. In the end, people were left with flowers outside a house, 2 children gone, a mother mourned, and questions that may never fully be answered, because sometimes the hardest cases are not the ones no one can solve. They are the ones where the truth arrived too late. For more crime documentaries and solved cold cases, subscribe